Yes, I can finally lie and say my grandma said we was native.
Cognitive dissonance is a word many of us are coming into contact with more and more, and this brings me joy and delight because we're all learning together. We're all learning words together and phrases together. This is kind of one of the positives about social media and the internet and the technology age. But cognitive dissonance is not confusion. Cognitive dissonance is part of confusion. It's actually the last portion of the process called confusion. When you are exiting the process called confusion, you have to get through cognitive dissonance.
Let me put my camera on. Do I look like a black to you people?
What does cognitive dissonance mean?
That was a good movie. Huh?
Yeah, I thought that was great.
Damn, Pan Goofies.
Cognitive dissonance means psychological stress caused by holding opposing values or ideas.
This is the soil of Florida, not Africa, not Europe, not no damn fantasy. This the mark of Moctezuma.
Psychological stress caused by holding opposing values or ideas. That's cognitive dissonance.
We ain't never been no damn slaves.
There's a couple things to keep in mind. So first is that there's 3 developmental stages to the human brain. There's 3 developmental stages to the human brain. There's from birth to 7 years old. From birth to 7 years old, we're all sponges. We don't differentiate between true and untrue information. There's just information, right? This is one of the reasons why my son, when he was 4, just fell head over heels in love with his grandpa. His grandpa's wrong pretty much all the time. He just lies. He tells stories that never happened. He just makes stuff up, right? Oh, the reason this is happening is because of that. And I'm like, no, that's not true at all. My 4-year-old son doesn't care. Or when he was 4, he didn't care. But Babu, who he calls his grandpa Babu tells the best stories. So now my son is 10. He has left that first developmental stage. But because of those years spent with his grandfather, he is now predisposed to believe his grandfather. The second developmental stage happens from 7 to 13. In that period of time, you can start to differentiate true and untrue information, but you choose which information you want to give more value to. So you're still absorbing it, you still retain it, but you might have a preference for one bit of information or the other, right? So now this is the place where it's like, yeah, I know I ate broccoli once and it wasn't terrible, but I don't really want to eat it anymore. Before that, you're just like, and if you give a 4-year-old broccoli, they'll put it in their mouth. So 7 to 13, people start to have a preference for the information, but they still absorb it all. Puberty, from 13 to 25, nobody thinks about this. Puberty lasts until you are 25 years old.
Yeah.
That period of time cognitively is characterized by the fact that you resist some forms of information. So now you actually have the cognitive capacity to hear something and reject it and not even let it come into your brain at all. So 7 to 13, you hear it, you retain it whether you like it or not. 0 to 7, everything comes in. 13 to 25, you're actually rejecting information. So when we create a dossier on somebody, we're looking at those first 25 years. Where did they spend the first 7 years? Oh, they spent it in China. Lots of stuff we can ask. We can high probability assume a number of things because they spent the first 7 years in China. Oh, they spent their first 7 years in Alabama. They've spent their first 7 years in New York. They spent their first 7 years in Canada. Lots of stuff you can pull from the foundation of how they were programmed. 7 to 13, they did this. Okay, so they were exposed in some places like Saudi Arabia, North Korea, Turkey, Syria. You can assume that some pieces of information they were just never exposed to. Right? They were predominantly exposed to one style of information. And if they were given other information, they may have absorbed, or they would have absorbed it, but the chances are they were never exposed to it.
Melanated people on here just now found out that they ate Nat Turner when they caught him.
What?
They ate him because they thought they were going to get superpowers because he was killing them.
Oh my god.
They also just found out that there was different types of plantations. It wasn't just picking cotton and tobacco. They had breeding plantations where they bred us like dogs. They had fighting plantations where you would just fight all day. They had cattle plantations where they raised us like animals to eat. They made leather out of our skin.
Oh my god!
They made furniture out of our skin and filled it with our hair. Wait till you find out that George Washington, they told you George Washington had wooden teeth, but that's a lie. His teeth were made out of lead, mercury, and slave teeth, and horse teeth. They used to use us for extra spare body parts. That slavery that they taught you in school is not really what happened.
We ain't never been no damn slaves. We was prisoners of war. And y'all still out here claiming that title like it's your birthright. You know where the word slave come from? Slavic, from over there, Slavonia. You from there?
White slave owners raped, beat, humiliated, mutilated, murdered, and cannibalized their slaves. Accurate history is teaching that George Washington's false teeth were made out of his slaves' teeth. Accurate history is teaching that Abraham Lincoln may have said some words and signed some shit, but he did not physically do anything to free the slaves. The white abolitionists also often get almost total credit for freeing the slaves. I bet you've never even asked yourself what the slaves were doing to free themselves, and the answer to that is most of the fucking work, including giving the ultimatum of war. But then we get a bunch of white people mad that their kids might feel guilty if we teach real history. It's not about your white child's feelings. Teaching accurate history isn't about white people's feelings. But that does sound like something that someone who's only ever been taught a white glorifying version of history would counter with.
Let her cook.
Ask why we ever felt like we needed to curate a false version of what white people did and did not do to black people to begin with. And then ask yourself why white-ass politicians are verbally attacking real history by calling it slurs, which is, by default, also the act of calling black people slurs.
Now, how does that apply to us in real life?
Time to do some real research.
Well, what would they have been exposed to? What would they have rejected based on their predisposition to these other formative years? And now you're talking to them in their 35 or 45. After 25, neuroplasticity is still a thing for the entirety of your life, meaning your brain can always learn something new, but your worldview has been set by 25. So unless something comes in and challenges your worldview and you give it permission to challenge your worldview, you're never going to change the way you think after the age of 25.
Sir, your afternoon corn is here.
Thanks, copper-colored queen. You finna get a raise, girl.
So we can largely assume that every person that we're talking to, especially if they're government, engineer, super secret squirrel stuff, they probably haven't been challenging their worldview since the time that they were 25. So now we have these different levels that we can use to make probabilistic assumptions about how they think and what they believe. When you have that dossier, that generalized dossier, then you can go into a more granular dossier about what they drink, what they eat, who they hang out with, are they cheating on their spouse, how often do they use their phone, all the really nitty-gritty detail stuff to create a picture of how you want to talk to this person.
Mr. Slav, I demand you kiss my ring as your last form of reparations.
Sure, Mr. Copper King.
So that your first introductory line essentially predisposes them to want to talk to you for the entire conversation.
Man, this night is dragging. You said it. Anything happening out there? You see them pan goofies making history?
Yep. Once we get that TikTok, we will shut them up.
So how is cognitive dissonance not confusion? Well, we have to look at the definition. You already know the definition of cognitive dissonance now. What's the definition of confusion? Confusion means to mix and mingle values or ideas, making them indistinguishable.
Look at all that. All this land. That's ours. We've been here.
That's cognitive dissonance, and that is confusion.
You need to leave immediately before the skinwalkers get you.
It happens on more than just a mental level.
Baby, listen, go out there, puff that patchy beard out, beat your chest, and tell that Slav you the real Native America.
Yes, my princess.
There's a spiritual confusion. There's emotional confusion. Like when you look across the lunchroom and you see somebody smiling and laughing, do you know if they're happy or if they're sad? Some people laugh when they're sad, right? So it gets muddy, but it takes discernment to fine tune and get confusion out of your life. Your inability to choose, more than likely, you're experiencing cognitive dissonance.
Okay, you can do this. Just be cool.
It's all right.
Morning, sir. Lovely day.
Oh, damn. It was all a dream.
But we have a lot of elders that are fueling this information, this false information in our community. This is one of them right here. And he's getting the false information by watching TikToks made by young pseudos that are spewing misinformation because they want to get famous. They want some type of fame and fortune, and they got self-hate, right? I remember back in the day when we were around these circles, and, you know, a lot of the pseudos weren't getting checked in, but it wasn't no beef on being African or being a part of Africa. It is now because a lot of y'all done left the church. You know what I'm saying? And y'all done came over here with y'all self-hate into the conscious circles. And now y'all just blasting on how y'all not African. Because that's what y'all doing in the church. Y'all was praising white T Jesus, right? But brother, all you got to do, well, first thing I want you to do is stop watching a lot of these TikToks and watching these young people make these silly videos about how they're not African, because it's confusing you, obviously, brother. You're confused. You're looking at this, you're probably looking at AI movies and images of these aboriginals putting this stuff out here, and it's confusing you, right? I need you to stop watching that, brother. I need you to go read some John Henry Clark. It's a brother, Home Team History, does great videos on the history of Africa. I want you to go watch those and then come back to me. Also, I want you to take your DNA test. Even though the aboriginals have told you those are fake, I'm telling you, I took mine and it's very real, and it's accurate, right? It's accurate enough. Take your DNA test, watch some things on African history, specifically West African history, not Egypt, any of that. Look at it, West African history, look at African history. You will learn a lot about yourself, which will make you proud. But I'm gonna tell you what not to do is listen to these pseudos on TikTok. Might need to put the TikTok down a little bit, brother, and you know, go delve deep into your family history, take a DNA test, and also, right, watch some things on the history of Africa and West Africa.
Heal your African identity crisis, pretendians. These pretendians are very uneducated and looking for a handout. All they have are lies, conspiracy theories, and pennies.
Don't be mad at me, pretendian. Be mad at your school for not educating you and your grandma for lying.